All right. Really, really cool guest I have for Chain Link Sports. I have Rachel Balkovec. Sorry, I got a tongue twister there. Rachel Balkovec. She is a New York Yankees hitting coach. She is also the first woman to be a full-time hitting coach in professional baseball history. So, Rachel, congratulations on that. First off, that is a major, major accomplishment, and thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And I just always like to acknowledge too, like I'm first of something, I guess, but also just really cool to let anyone know listening who doesn't know that there were actually five women hired in different roles, various roles, but five women who are in uniform this season. So just really cool all around.
Awesome. And of course, I asked you how to pronounce your name before we started talking, and I totally busted it right from the beginning. But that's okay.
No, you
Hopefully,
did great. You
all
killed
right,
it.
all
Nailed
right,
it.
good. So, what I want to know first is what was your upbringing like when you were younger, and I guess how did you like develop a love for sports? Because obviously you're a coach at a professional level for a baseball team. So, what was that kind of like your whole life leading up to your career?
How long do we have on the podcast, right? Yeah, my upbringing had a lot to do with the version of me that you're seeing right now, and I think that it's funny how the whole world is like, wow, I can't believe you're this, you're hitting coach with the Yankees. And it's like, no, my family can believe it. And my teammates, from when I was young can believe it. And I've always kind of been like this, but I would credit that to my parents raising us a certain way. I have two sisters. So we're three girls, and my dad definitely did not treat us like we were, three young little princesses. I think that was pretty clear from the get go. We were all in sports by the time we could walk, and just
Right.
um, really raised as capable young women. And I think I talk about this all the time. From the time that I was 12, I knew or thought that I would play college sports. And so from the time I was 12, I was training like I was going to play in college. And so my dad would take me to the gym, and God knows what I was doing when I was there when I was 12. But the idea of going to train at the gym for my sport and doing all these things, that was like from when I was really young, really young. So childhood growing up was just super active, outside all the time, playing all kinds of different sports: soccer, basketball, volleyball, did some gymnastics here and there. And our parents had us real busy, and really busy with active things and athletic things.
Was that hard when you were younger? Maybe in comparison to like maybe some friends you had, like maybe you had a more like stricter regimen in terms of your athletics, compared to your friends or like kids at school or whatever it may be.
Yeah, definitely. Like I got the traditional like bullying. I was uh my sisters and I, but I'm the biggest of my sisters. I'm 5'8.5", and I probably still weigh 175 pounds. And I think by the time I was 16, I weighed like 155 pounds and just was this brick house of an athlete. And from when I was really young, I was teased about my body and teased about even my intensity. I can remember when I was like 12, people making fun of me for lifting weights and going to practice so much. But
Right.
that fell away obviously as I got closer to college, and I was getting recruited by Division I universities. And especially in my high school, I was the first Division I softball player to come out of my high school. And I think people started to go, like I kind of started to think like, oh yeah, joke's on you, because I'm getting this opportunity to go and do something that no one else is going to do. You're going to go and drink and go to your
Absolutely.
sorority parties, and I'm going to be traveling all over the country playing with a top level institution. So
Right.
um, yeah, I had the normal bullying. I think that any for a woman, any young, competitive, aggressive, athletic woman still probably experiences. Men's not so much, but there's different things that come with being a young guy going through that. So
Right.
yeah, definitely. But the
Yeah.
bullying doesn't stop. It's like
Of
I'm still
course.
getting bullied now. Now it's on Twitter for my job. you know.
Well, hopefully those Twitter, whatever they're called, the Twitter, I can't remember.
Trolls.
Yeah, the trolls, the Twitter trolls, they're a little easier to ignore. But now that you are at maybe the one of the highest levels that you can get to in coaching, what was that like during your path to pro baseball? Once you graduated college, I guess like how did you decide that you wanted to do that and all the steps it took to get where you are?
Yeah, early years were pretty tough. I'd say, again, interestingly, it's just the world is working so differently now, where there's there's social media accounts dedicated just to women in sports that are celebrating women in sports all the time and putting images up that are like, oh, I didn't know this woman was coaching for this, or I didn't know this one. So that's 2020, but when I first got in, it was 2012, and there wasn't social media. It was Facebook,
Yeah.
but it was still like your Facebook. It was still just like for your friends in college. But when I first got in, it was like the opposite, where I was discriminated against. I had a lot of problems getting in, and the world has changed so rapidly to where that's never like this time around getting hired as a hitting coach. It seems like everyone in the whole world is like, oh, I can't believe it. It's crazy. And I'm like, well, you should have seen me in 2012 trying to get a job, because this was relatively easy,
Right.
because
Right.
I had all these contacts built up in baseball, and I had been mentored by a hitting coach with the Astros, who is now my boss, the minor league hitting coordinator for the Yankees, who hired me. It was relatively easy than when I was on the outside of baseball back in 2012, which was when no one was hiring women, and there weren't, by the way, there weren't nutritionists, there weren't mental skills coaches, there weren't analysts. So these positions that are now kind of traditionally female, or like not traditionally, but can be, nutritionist is traditionally a female. So once you
Right.
introduce a nutrition department to an organization, there's just actually not that many men who are nutritionists. So they had to start, all these women start coming in. So the landscape has changed for me wildly, but getting in was really, really difficult. And I mean, the kind of, I guess, famous story that's gone around about me is it was so difficult that I was discriminated against blatantly in 2013, probably other times, but I was told to my face, like, you're not getting this job, and it's because you're a woman. And also, I've talked to this man that told me this. I've talked to many other organizations trying to help you out, and they're also not going to hire a woman, even though your resume is great. And so I think that, that was,
Wow.
yeah, that was really difficult. So much so that I was so desperate after that experience that the next year round, changed my name on my resume from Rachel to Ray, just trying to look like a man, trying to get an interview, frankly. I knew they were going
Right.
to find out that I was a woman, but I was just trying to get people to not overlook my name before even reading my resume. Because I think that was probably happening too. They saw Rachel and they didn't even read my resume, which had LSU, Arizona State, St. Louis Cardinals, Los Tigres de
Yeah.
Licey. Like, my resume was phenomenal for a young person, and I just didn't even think they were reading it. So I changed my name to Ray to hopefully just get them to look at my materials with a clear eye and go, wow, this resume is very qualified. So lots of problems getting in, definitely sprinkled no matter, like, throughout my career with different issues that have come up. But I would
Right.
say now it's smoother than ever. I've got a women's uniform. I've got a women's locker room. Like, whoa, that's massive change since I first got in 8 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you, I guess, mentally almost reset after that? Because, when you go into other interviews, you know what I mean, after that, or like other encounters with people within organizations, like how did you, keep going forward, because obviously that's not like an easy thing to hear. Like that's, a pretty harsh thing for somebody to say, but like, I guess, how did you keep going, like, after that experience?
I'm an athlete. And like I say, currently, I'm an athlete because I don't believe like, I know that there's a conversation going around about identity. Like, when you leave athletics, your identity is lost. And okay, oh, I'm an ex-athlete. I'm a has-been. I'm a washed-up person. And I'm like, no, I've approached life like an athlete since I was 5. And just because my collegiate career ended doesn't mean I'm not an athlete anymore. And I'm going to approach every
Yeah.
problem like that. And so I think that when you go through something difficult, or you're trying to beat something as an athlete, there's two sides to it. There's the side of like, hey, I just want to be good. I want to get what I deserve, or I want to see my hard work pay off, type of thing. And I had worked so hard to that point, and I was like, no, I want to keep going no matter what. If you had a setback, an injury, went into a slump, something happened, you just want to do it because of the journey, right? Like, it's this, like, the air quotes grind, the thing that you just love to do. And so I was approaching my career like that. Like, that's how I want to do it. But also, when you're an athlete, there's an opponent that you want to beat, and you're like, yeah, like, fuck this guy. Like, I'm gonna, no,
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, it's not, it's, yeah, it's, I want to do this because I want to do it. But also, there's an opponent across the field where you're like, okay, like, yeah, you got me, you struck me out on that, you struck me out looking, I'll be back next at bat, type of thing. And so for me, it was like, I wanted to do it because I truly just wanted to coach in professional baseball. And like that mental, it's like even when I was discriminated against, I was like, okay, well, I still want to do it. So I'm going to keep going. Number one, because I just truly want to coach. But also, like the other side of it, of course, is like this. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like you're going to discriminate against me. Like, oh, I'll see you next year,
Yeah.
motherfucker. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll be back.
Yeah.
Like I'll see you next season. I'm not leaving just because you told me you can't hire me because I'm a woman.
Right.
And then, of course, like when I actually was hired full time, and not only just full time, but I was hired as a minor league coordinator, which is a huge role. So I went from not being able to get an internship to being hired as a coordinator. And then I'm seeing all these people at the next year's conference, and just like throughout my travels and stuff, I'm seeing all these people who I know discriminated against me.
That's a
I'm like,
big
oh,
fuck you.
hi,
That's a big fuck you right
hi.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? Like, just, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
like big fuck you,
Yeah.
So I think it's like an athlete. There's the intrinsic motivation of like you just want to do this, but also there was an opponent for me.
Right.
And sometimes that makes the winning a little juicier when you beat someone that you don't like, or when you beat somebody that you feel has wronged you. It's just the truth, that competitive spirit.
Right. And that opponent you're talking about, obviously those opponents are clearly showing the people that, were rejecting you and were discriminating against you. But did you also find that you were kind of, your own opponent at times, maybe like in moments of weakness where you doubted yourself, like were there ever those
Yeah,
like internal battles like, between you and like during those job interviews?
yeah, of course. Like people are like, oh, did you ever want to quit? I'm like, yes. But like, doesn't anyone who's working for something that is out of their reach, I don't even want to say, oh, anyone who's working to be the first something, or anyone who's working for a national championship, like forget it. Anyone who's doing anything that's a little bit out of reach. So it's like anyone who's ever been an underdog knows that, yeah, of course I thought about quitting. But sometimes it's like, and even now, I mean, God, I keep doing things in my career that I'm just like, oh my God, like, am I really going back to school at age 30 to get a second master's degree? Am I really going to be an intern at Driveline at the age of 31 doing this really difficult research? Like, fuck.
Right.
And I'm living in Seattle, and I'm broke because I was a master's student for a second time, and I funded for a year and a half. Like, think about this. This continues to happen in your life. It's not just like the one time that you did something hard. I approach everything the same. And I just like, I went back to school at the age of 30 after being in baseball for 6 years, 7 years, whatever. I quit my job, moved to Europe, sold my car, gave up everything, was without money for a year and a half, paid myself out of my own savings, went to Driveline. I was an intern there for 6 months. I lived in an apartment with no heat. So I'd come home to my apartment in the wintertime in Seattle, and like I had a space heater, and I'd like eat my dinner sitting in front of the space heater because my house was so fucking cold. And
Right.
yes, of course I thought about quitting. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
I didn't like that,
Yeah. Of
so
course.
if you're not thinking about quitting, then are you even on the right path?
That's interesting. Like,
And
and
people do quit. No one blames somebody for like trying to climb Everest, and then it gets too dangerous, they're going to die, and then they turn around. It's like just the pursuit of Everest is actually admirable.
right. And do people almost like, do you find that people have a hard time understanding that when you do say things like that? Like if you don't feel like quitting, then are you really chasing what you really want? Like, is that a hard concept for people that maybe aren't as competitive, as you, or, athletes in general? Like, have you found that, like, I guess in telling your own story?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because not many people really, I think everyone listening to this is going to nod their head, but really putting that into practice is like not many people do that. So I think that most people can relate to, oh, I did something hard one time, blah blah blah, but like to really put that into practice consistently over a long period of time, that's what makes you rare. And
Absolutely.
by the way, to do it by yourself when you don't have a team around you, you showing up to weights and conditioning in the morning early, like, oh, you're not tough. You're being forced to do that with your teammates. What people are counting on you to be there. That's
Yep.
not hard, but once you get out on your own and you've got to make tough decisions for your life, your career, your family, whatever that is, that's when I'll give you credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off the podcast by saying, well, first I started off by botching your name, but we're going to still ignore that. But after that, I mentioned that you were the first woman to be a full-time hitting coach for a professional baseball team. What is it like to have that, title next to your name after years of hard work, and just to be recognized as that, and almost be like a pioneer for women in the sports industry?
Just I just get gratitude. Like I'm just like, and also realizing that it's not me. It's not just me. It's the people who hired me. It's my parents. It's my
Absolutely.
sisters. It's because like I could work as hard as I want, but somebody's still gotta sign off on hiring me. And I think what people fail to realize too is like my boss hired me, but the owner knew, like the Steinbrenner knew that they were hiring a female hitting coach, even if I was a minor league hitting coach, which I am. Steinbrenner knew that. So many people had to say yes down the line that
Yeah.
I just have to show gratitude, because if one of those people was like, no, if Steinbrenner wasn't okay with it, but everybody else was, the answer is no.
Yeah.
So like, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful for like society has changed. There's different things going around that made it possible for me to be hired in a role like this. Yeah, I might have been technically, I think I was the first person to be hired as a hitting coach in professional baseball. But then, I mentioned this earlier, but other organizations were in the process. Veronica Alvarez, she was a guest coach at spring training for the A's the year prior. Justine Siegel, who you may or may not know of, she's been in
Yes. Yeah.
baseball
I've heard of her. Yeah.
coaching independent leagues internationally. Like she's been around for like I think 10 to 15 years. So technically, I hold the title of like first full-time hitting coach to be hired in this specific role. But simultaneously, by the way, the Cubs were hiring Rachel Bolden, who was a hitting analyst, but same thing, So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
the first to hold a certain title, but there have been women in the game, and also, by the way, NFL hiring women coaches, NBA hiring women coaches, all those things factor into my opportunity. So I think it's like I can be really proud of the hard work that I put in, and I have paid my fucking dues. I will tell you that. But there had to be a lot of other things going on around me that I have to be grateful for.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, last thing I want to ask you is, what advice would you give to other young women who are trying to break into the sports industry that will probably most likely face the same difficulties and hardships that you had to face when you had to break in? So, what's some things you would like to say to them?
I don't think they're facing the same things. I think they're facing different things now, which I will talk about. But if they are facing the same things, I'll go two sides. By the way, my advice has now changed in the past year.
Right.
So I'll talk about that. My advice last year at this time would have been, it's not fair. It's not going to be fair. And that's okay. And embrace being the underdog, because if you're the underdog, you're going to have to work twice as hard, which in the long run will
It'll
help
pay
you.
off. Yeah, it'll pay
In
off.
that
Yeah.
moment, it doesn't feel good because you're
Yeah.
watching everybody else around you get opportunities and whatever. And you're like, what the hell? It doesn't feel good. But I promise you, in the long term, if you're the underdog and you've got to work twice as hard, all that extra work and all those extra things that you learn through that process are going to help you tremendously. And I'm still benefiting from having to do all that extra work before I got to the full-time gig. Like I'm still benefiting from that now, almost 8 years later. So it's not fair. It doesn't have to be fair. And just like know the game you're playing and either accept it or go get a normal job. Don't complain about it. Be thankful that you're having to work harder. Number one. Now, to present time. So if you're dealing with unfair stuff, say thank you. That's my first piece of advice. The next piece of advice is now the world has changed. So now, whether it's because of the women's movement, whether it's because of what's been going on in sports, and even really recently, which has happened with Jared Porter and the Mets, like
Yeah.
I know for a fact there is a young woman right now, a 19-year-old young woman who barely has completed one internship. It's a very good internship, but barely has completed one internship in sports, and she's 19 years old. And a professional sports organization contacted her, somehow got her information. She doesn't even know how they got her information. They went out of their way to get her information and said, are you interested in internship because we want to hire you? Not, are you interested in interviewing? They literally like found her and basically are begging her to come to their organization, more or less to probably fill a quota. And I've told her that. I'm like, you're 19, you haven't even finished one internship, and they're just like desperate to hire women.
Yeah.
So you're facing a whole new challenge these days. Now I have to tell women, hey, slow down your process and develop as a coach before you go and jump into a role like that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
don't just understand what's going on. And I have to understand this now too, that I'm probably going to get interviews, unfortunately, because of my name. Whereas before, I was worried about them skipping my name.
Yeah.
Even after I had I had this stock resume. I had
yes.
the most stacked resume you could think of when you're 23, 24. And I still wasn't getting even a phone call.
Right.
Now you have this tiny little resume that you can't, it's the size of Connecticut. You can't even see it. And like a professional organization is reaching out to you. So you have to really look yourself in the mirror and go, am I qualified for this job, or are they just wanting to fill a quota? And also from a development standpoint, as a coach and a young person, am I really ready for that? Or should I take my time doing more internships, work at the college level, work
Yeah.
your way up and learn from really great mentors before you step into a major league organization where you're not going to get as much support?
Especially like a team like the Mets, or I guess any team that might face like a controversy that they're facing. I mean, like luckily they did fire the guy right away, but in a case like that, they, like you said, like they may be desperate to almost save face and to bring more
Desperate.
women. Yeah, bring more women
They
in
are
to the
desperate
organization.
right now.
Yeah,
I'll be surprised if they don't hire 3 women in the next year.
yeah, yeah.
4 or
So
5. I'll be surprised if they don't have 10 new women on staff in different roles.
right, right. Have you seen that so far in your time in pro baseball?
Yeah, of course I have. But I never used to see it. And now in the past, I would say 2 to 3 years, well, I didn't used to see it because you got to think I was hired full time in 2014. The next full time female strength and conditioning coach that was hired wasn't for 3 more years. Like there were no women. And when I say no women, I mean in a literal sense, like outside of the front office, which there have been women in the front office for 30 years. But for me, like on field and player development, directly working with players on their performance, like there were no women. There was me, Sue Falsoni with the Dodgers, and maybe one other athletic trainer in all of professional baseball. Now again with the new mental skills, nutrition analysts, there have been a lot more just opportunity for women in general.
Right.
And so, but now again, we have the flip end of the problem. So I never used to see it. And now I'm seeing it in the past couple of years really kick up, where I'm genuinely concerned. If I get an interview, I'm going to have to really ask myself if I'm getting it because they really want me because of my credentials and my information, or if they want me because they want to fill a quota and look good to the press.
Absolutely. It's so interesting how like your position and all young women's positions, and really in a lot of other industries besides sports, but like the tables have turned, and like it may seem like it's good, but then in the long run, like you talked about earlier, being the underdog, putting the work in the end it might hurt you,
In the long
like
run, it's bad for women and it's bad for the game.
absolutely.
And that's a really unpopular opinion. And I feel like I have to voice that. This is probably one of the first podcasts where I've been really, really open about it with the recent events with Jared Porter and the Mets. But in the long run, hiring women that are not qualified is bad for women and it's bad for the game.
Absolutely.
And I'm saying that, and I might be the only person that can say it without getting in trouble.
Right. Right.
And I might still get in trouble.
Well, I mean, I do agree with you, but I mean, I would definitely take your word over most just because of, the things you went through and your qualifications and all that stuff. But I think that's a very good point, what you're saying. But that's all I got for you. That really was awesome. I hope that, anybody who does listen to this takes away, those things you're talking about being the underdog, putting in the work. Like you should almost want to quit at something if it's the right path for you, because you're always going to face those tough challenges. But Rachel, I mean, that was really awesome. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So I wish you the best of luck whenever you guys get back to work. Hopefully it's soon, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.